The initial report indicates that both the fuel switches were moved. The question we have is whether or not that was a manual movement and those switches were actually moved by a pilot. Because as we also learned, the pilot says, I did not move those switches, right? And so the question then is this an erroneous movement caused by the computer? We know there's been at least one prior incident involving the 787. At this point, anyone who would point to the pilot solely is speculating, and we just don't know.
Why is the raw data still being kept secret? What are the authorities is hiding? Is it your question?
That is the question.
I'm joining with Mike Andrew, one of the top aviation lawyer of world, and he is joining with Times Network exclusively in India. Sir, first of all, I just want to know the purpose of your visit to India in Gujarat.
Right. So the purpose of our visit here, we were asked by families to help understand what happened in this crash, help get answers, and help get to the bottom of exactly what happened here and why.
What's your plan of action? Are you pursuing civil or criminal liability?
So I practice civil law in the United States, and we seek to hold corporations or individuals accountable for wrongful conduct through the civil justice system, right? And so in this case, if the investigation indicates that there's a problem with the aircraft, we would seek to hold those companies accountable in the United States.
So whom do you plan to hold accountable, both Boeing or Air India?
Well, in this case, we're keeping our mind open. We need to understand the black box data. We need to know what the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder both say so that we know what happened without conjecture. We've all heard recently that people have jumped out and blamed the pilots, for example, without understanding or knowing exactly what happened. So until we have this data, we don't know who's accountable.
Have you read that investigation report?
Yes, the initial report. I have. The initial report indicates that both the fuel switches were moved. The question we have is whether or not that was a manual movement and those switches were actually moved by a pilot. Because as we also learned, the pilot says, I did not move those switches, right? And so the question then is this an erroneous movement caused by the computer? We know there's been at least one prior incident involving the 787 and this system that caused these switches, or at least the fuel supply, to be cut when it should not have been.
How would you respond to those who would say that AIB inquiry is still ongoing and should first conclude that investigation?
So the AIB board investigation, we agree, is very important. We need to let them do their work. And I applaud them for coming forward and saying they are independent and they want to get to the bottom of it. At this point, we're also calling for the release of the data so that aviation experts as well can look at this data and understand what's happened.
You have won in past a case against Boeing. So in this case, what you are thinking, how much of time it will take to get justice?
Right. So these are complicated cases. They take a lot of time to work through. As you know, the 787 is an extremely complicated aircraft with millions of lines of code and thousands of channels of data. In the United States, from the time that a case is filed until it is resolved, about 2 years is a good rule of thumb.
About 2 years. How many families do you representing right now?
Right. Currently, we have at least 65. We had additional meetings yesterday, and so that number most likely has increased, but at least 65.
65. Did a hidden computer glitch trigger the fatal switch movement not to pilots? Is there any kind of this?
Yes, there is. In fact, that's the All Nippon flight of 2019, the Japan Airways. And in that case, there was an erroneous input called for by a part of the throttle control malfunctioning system that caused power to be cut to these engines when no pilot had moved the switches. And so our question is, did that happen here?
Do you think is Boeing is protected just because there were no American citizens on board?
Do I think they are protected? No. Do I think the narrative is being put forth to distract? Yes, I do. I do, in fact. At this point, anyone who would point to the pilot solely is speculating, and we just don't know.
Why is the raw data still being kept secret? What are the authorities is hiding? Is it your question?
That is the question. And we don't know if it's hiding necessarily or if it's just a function of there being so much information to go through. Again, there are millions of lines of code. There are thousands of inputs that are recorded here. And experts need to have the chance to comb through that data and put together an accurate timeline of when the rat deployed, when the switches were activated, and what happened.
Have two more near disasters on 787s already happened since this crash?
Yeah, and I don't know that I would term them as near disasters, but they are certainly very concerning incidents. There's the case of the flight that took off from Dulles, bound for Munich, and after takeoff suffered an engine failure. The pilots declared a mayday, came back and landed safely. The pilots were not blamed in that incident. They are alive, right? So they weren't blamed. We also know a flight that took off from LA bound for Santiago suffered a premature rat deployment. That's the ram air turbine, the auxiliary backup system. We have been told that that should only occur if both engines have lost failure or if there's been a failure of hydraulics or electrical power. In this case, it appears the plane was able to circle and dump fuel and come back and land under its own power. Both of those incidents raise serious questions for us whether there is a pervasive issue in the 787 or if these are just coincidental. Right now, we don't know.
Do you really think is the world ignoring this crash simply because it happened in India?
I don't know that it is necessarily being ignored by the world. I know that we're certainly paying much more attention to it here in India because it affects everyone, not just members on the plane, but also on the ground. As you know, there were individuals who were killed both in the building and on the street out front. And so aviation safety is something that affects everyone worldwide.
What are the families is demanding right now?
Transparency, answers, accountability. They want to know what happened. They want to know why this happened. And they want to know what they can do to prevent this from ever happening again.
Why is getting the raw black box data so critical for the investigation?
Right. So the black box data is so critical because it is the most accurate record of what happened. It is recordings that were made on board the aircraft as the crash occurred. And it gives us the most accurate picture from a digital perspective and also an audio perspective in the cockpit of what's happening in those critical seconds leading up to the failure and the crash.
My last question. What was the 2019 ANA incident?
The 2019 ANA incident is the one that we talked about a second ago. The 787 was coming in for landing, and the throttle control malfunctioning system believed that the plane was on the ground. There's a system on board the 787 that is designed to prevent the engines from over-revving or running away. Okay? If it's on the ground, for example, and the engine begins to overspeed, there is an automatic computer that cuts the throttle, cuts the power to these engines. So in the 2019 incident, as the plane came in for landing, the power was cut to both engines while it was still in the air. The pilots were not at fault. They were able to land the plane and everyone safely disembarked. But that raises a serious question whether there is a flaw in that system and what caused that to occur.
Hope you will get justice for these 241 families from US courts within a 2 year. Do you really think you will get justice within a 2 years?
I think we will have answers within the 2 years. I think we'll have answers much quicker than that. The question then becomes, who is responsible and how do we hold them accountable?